My name is Kent Abernathy. I'm with the Blue River group of the Sierra Club. We have Rebecca Dickson today. She is the chair. She's my counterpart for the Blue River group here for Summit County, Grand County, and Eagle County. She is with the Indian Peaks group. She is the chair of that organization, and she has started up in the last year an organization called People and Pollinator Action Network. And that is the strong advocacy group of protecting our pollinators. And so that's something she's going to be talking to us a little bit more about. But today we're here to learn about just what Rebecca has learned over the years protecting our pollinators. And we're going to learn a lot about bees, at least some of us. So I think some of us know a lot about bees, but I think a lot of us are going to learn a lot more about bees. So, and I did want to mention that the Blue River group of the Sierra Club, this has been our first presentation that we've put together we haven't done anything for several years. And so this is one of our first events. And it coincides nicely, if you're thinking about being a Sierra Club member, with the a special Sierra Club membership is available right now for $15. And we have some forms out there in the front. And for $15, you get a duffel bag, you get a yearly subscription to the Sierra Club, and you also get all that money goes right to your local group that serves Summit County, Eagle, and Grand County. And so it gets to stay right here locally. So if you're thinking about doing it, if you've been on the fence, I encourage you to do that. And after the presentation, we have some pollinator-friendly plants. They're asters, and they're grown without neonicotinoids. They're neonicotinoid-free, so the bees are not getting any nicotine, which isn't very good for bees either, it turns out. So, and they're only $2. So I encourage you to take one home with you. And without any further ado, here's Rebecca. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Hey everybody, how many of you are beekeepers? I know there's one here, right? There's one beekeeper. And you're a really good beekeeper. I think you know Beth Conley. Yes, Beth Conley is the head of the Colorado Beekeeper Association. She told me about you. She told me you might be here. And you're a beekeeper as well?
Yes.
I'm sure that both of you are a lot better at beekeeping than I am. I've only been beekeeping for 3 years. So, but I have learned a lot about bees from books, and I'm an activist. I've been an activist for a long time. So well, I want to start tonight by showing you bees. How many of you feel like you know bees and their life cycle fairly well? Not that many. Okay, cool. And that's good, because this is I'm just going to show the first 9 or 10 minutes of this film because it's just really cool. You'll see something interesting happening. The beekeepers in the room will know exactly what's happening. The rest of you might have to guess, but you might guess pretty well by the time you see those little images. So there's a number of things happening. If you haven't seen it before, this is a wonderful film. It's called More Than Honey. It's a German film. I think I've got it set up that the important parts where they're speaking, it's going to be in English, but there are subtitles if not, okay? But we've had some computer glitches. Yeah, we have. Okay. So this is the very beginning of the film, and this should work when I touch this button. And at first it's really quiet, so don't panic that there's no sound yet.
Should we turn the lights down?
I'm afraid. It could fly a rocket to the moon, you guys.
Es war so, dass mein Urgroßvater, mein Großvater, die haben gebielt und mein Vater hat gebielt und die haben eigentlich sich nicht darum interessiert. Die haben Bienenstiche nicht gerne gehabt und der Vater ist älter geworden und dann hat er dann einfach mal gesagt, wenn ich nicht mit den Bienen machen will, bin er der Verkäufer. Das war etwas, was mir nicht gepasst hat. Dann habe ich mich angefangen zu interessieren darum und habe gedacht, wenn die alle gefordert haben, stand im Bienen zu haben und Bienenstiche zu ertragen, dann bin ich so. Also ein Weichei bin ich nicht.
The bees fed our family. They were a part of my grandfather's cannery. They pollinated the raspberries, pears and apricots and his orchards, and also the cucumbers. I loved my grandfather for all the animals he had, horses, dogs, birds, even a roebuck. But what he loved most were his bees. He had 150 bee colonies. He even built a special house for them. Lying in the grass in his garden, I could hear the bees buzzing. But I didn't know that I was watching the flowers having sex. The plants, my grandfather explained, are rooted to the ground. They can't run across the field and hug each other, but they can't have children on their own. What they need is a messenger of love, a bee. To attract a bee, the plants produce sweet nectar. The bee drinks from one flower and flies to the next, taking along male pollen on its fur. So while looking for food, it pollinates plant after plant. And each plant starts to bear fruit. My grandfather was a patriarch of gardens and bees, people and machines. He was fascinated by how everything interacted. But the bees are in trouble now. A few years ago, they started dying. Not just our bees, they're dying all over the world. The news is full of reports. They say it's a mystery. I take to the road to find out why.
Bloom is nearly full now. It's just such a gorgeous time of year to be out here. I mean, it's just beautiful. And no one sees this. Beehive sees it. The almond guy sees it. Listen. Now, can you hear that? That's the sound of money. Fresh, printed money. Bees and trees. Nice. ladies. How are you today? Yeah, you're busy. It's warm and sunny. An old mate. That's a nut that didn't get shaken, didn't get hauled. And right there, yeah. Delicious.
1/3 of our food wouldn't exist without bees. My grandfather explained their secret to me. Colorful and fragrant plants are pollinated by insects. The plain and dry ones by the wind. The apricots and raspberries on the jam labels were printed by my grandfather. His competitors were more efficient. They had the fruit delivered by rail. My grandfather went bankrupt. All he had left were his bees. They still brought him the nectar. But the apples grew in a paradise he had lost.
So, I'm going to take this opportunity right now to quickly thank the Blue River Group for bringing me up here, for having me come up. I like talking about bees and pesticides. I don't like talking about pesticides. I like talking about bees, and I want you all to know what pesticides are doing to bees. And I also want to thank Colorado Mountain College for allowing us to be here tonight. This is a good venue. Okay, so I have a PowerPoint. So far our technology is working pretty well. Let's see if this comes up. Oh, yay. Okay, yeah. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen, do you, when you use technology? Okay, so I'm a beekeeper of sorts. I'm a lazy beekeeper. I'm a beekeeper who has a high respect for bees. I've read far more books than I've worked with hives on bees, but I'm doing my best, okay? It's not easy to do these days. So what you have here is a photo of my beehives. I have two. I'm a backyard beekeeper. I did just harvest some honey, but I don't sell honey. So those are my beehives, and those are my bees, the first bees that I ever installed. And that's a pretty clean, tidy hive. They always keep their hive tidy, but it does get a little bit more used, lived in looking than that. Here's my bees, and they're already creating comb. So far, so good. Are you a Langstroth hive person? Yeah. Are you also a Langstroth hive? Yeah. So am I, as you can see. My bees, they died off. I've lost 100% of my bees so far. 3 years ago, I set up one hive. That hive collapsed here in late March, early April. It lasted 3 years. I feel like that wasn't too bad. I had another hive that died a year ago in March of 2014. I replaced it with a swarm, and it died in March as well. I have a neighbor, next door neighbor, who had his lawn service put pesticides on his yard by Finthrin, which is a pesticide that kills ants, red ants, and kills social insects of all sorts. Bees are a social insect. It killed, okay, we cannot be sure, I need to quickly say, we cannot be sure, but my bees died off pretty quickly right after that. It could have been they were already in trouble because of other elements, because of other pesticide influences and other problems, lack of forage and such. Nonetheless, it did happen pretty soon, one right after the other. I'm going to talk about that. I don't want you to hate my neighbor. That isn't my point here tonight. I don't think demonizing each other helps at all. America's really into demonizing each other right now, and you see we're not getting anywhere on some very important issues. So that's not my point. But I do want to talk to you about why my beehives collapsed from a number of different perspectives. I did just replace my bees. And so I have another hive that, as of when I left Boulder this afternoon, they were all alive. So I'm hoping they still will be. So anyway, I've lost 100% of my bees so far. Lost all 3 of my hives that I've established. You might think, well, she's a beginner, of course, and that is a factor. Being a beginner is a factor. I'm sure your numbers are better than mine. But the average American beekeeper is losing 42% of their hives every year, right? That's a number that has just been established. It's worse in some places, better in others. But 42% is a pretty high number. If you're trying to make a living at beekeeping, you've got a real challenge. You know, I do it, I'm a backyard beekeeper. My day job is at CU Boulder, and I'm glad I'm not trying to make money, you know, raising bees. In any case, let's go back to the film. So what happened at the very beginning of the film? You saw something happen. Do you all know what you saw happen? The queen emerged from a queen cell. And so you might have noticed that bee that came out, she was a lot bigger than the others, right? So she's a virgin queen at this point. She's just emerged from a queen cell. She's probably going to be really mean to other queens that might be emerging. She'll find them and she'll sting them to death because there's only one queen. And eventually she'll fly out of the hive on a nice warm day, and drones will find her. And she'll be mated, and she will never leave the hive again unless she swarms, which was the second part of that little, it was in the Bavarian Alps, I believe, and that fellow was collecting a swarm. You might have noticed he wasn't wearing a bee suit. Okay, I've collected 3 or 4 swarms now because my bees are prone to swarming. At least the ones I had were. I always wear a bee suit. Maybe you don't. I wear a bee suit. I wear gloves. I'm fine with it now, but the first time I did it, I was pretty scared. And the guy I was doing it with the first time, he was in a t-shirt, short-sleeve t-shirt. He didn't wear a veil. You know, I think he was wearing shorts. So in any case, though, yeah, I don't think he got stung once. Swarms, if you come across one. What's that?
Was it Greg?
Oh no, it was his name's Bob. He's up in Fort Collins area, and his name's not going to come to me right now. But, Tim Broad, I think, does the same thing. I think you guys probably know Tim. In any case, though, swarms are actually very docile. It's when bees are sort of at their most docile state. So if you come across one, there really is no reason to be afraid of them. And bees in general are very docile creatures. I've been stung 2.5 times. I think I was stung a week and a half ago, but I'm not really sure. I think the bee stung through my glove, but I'm not really sure. That's not bad, given that I've had thousands and thousands of bees in my backyard. And nobody else around me that I know of. I think my husband got stung by a bee once or twice, by his ear. Okay, yeah, so they're pretty docile. I mean, bees get a bad reputation in part because of yellow jackets that look a lot like them and are about the same size. And yellow jackets are a lot meaner little creature than our bees. Okay, so I want to talk to you. I think there's a mixed audience here, so I want to just talk about some basics about biocides. Biocides is the collective term that some people use, scientists use, to talk about pesticides and herbicides. The two of them have been differentiated in the past. Increasingly, people are using the term pesticides to refer to herbicides and what have been known as pesticides in the past. But typically, what a pesticide refers to is a chemical, usually made by a very big chemical company, that kills bees doesn't kill bees. It's meant to kill insects. But bugs are bugs, and anything that kills red ants, for instance, or kills an aphid, kills whitefly, will probably kill a bee as well. It depends on how much it gets exposed to. In any case, pesticides, and so that's what you're reading about up there right now. Right now, there's systemic pesticides and neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids are a type of systemic pesticide. And I'm going to go over that in a little bit of detail. It's a little bit confusing, but it's important to understand that systemic pesticides are a new breed of pesticide. It's not DDT. DDT has been outlawed for a number of different reasons, partly because of its effect on our birds. But it's not DDT, it's a different class of pesticide altogether. And neonicotinoids, the systemics, are in general far more toxic than DDT was, okay? They use it in smaller amounts, supposedly, right? But we're learning that it appears that no amount of neonicotinoid is small enough to be safe for other insects, like butterflies, birds, or pollinators, and especially bees. Okay, so, and then herbicides are used to kill plants. That's the dandelions, that's the crabgrass. And the most famous herbicide of all is Roundup, which might be sitting in some of your garages right now. And that's okay. Just take it to a toxic center, get rid of it. In any case, though, Roundup, I've got more things I'll say about Roundup. It has been considered the innocuous herbicide, and we're finding out more and more that it's not that innocuous, okay? So that's the difference between the two. I'm going to probably use the term pesticide. When you hear me use the word, I'm probably referring to both herbicides and pesticides, but I'll try to differentiate for clarity's sake when necessary. The word you can use that refers to both of them is biocides, something that just kills life. So 5 billion pounds. I'm going to be using just a lot of stark numbers rather than really crowded slides. That was probably the most crowded slide you'll see from me. I think the numbers are important. 5 billion pounds of what? 5 billion pounds of biocides, of pesticides and herbicides, are used on American land every year, public and private every year. 5 billion pounds, right? Yes, she did say billion. I'm not making a mistake there. This number comes from the EPA. And it's a number that's a little bit old, a little bit dated probably. It's 2007, 2008. The number is, I'm sure, quite a bit higher. Well, not, okay. The number is higher now, I'm sure. These pesticides are very popular things, okay? So 5 billion pounds, 16 pounds per person in this country. For every man, woman, and child, 16 pounds of biocide are used every single year. So you can think about that, 16 pounds. That's 2 gallons of water, okay, full of pesticide, poison. You can use your imagination to figure out how much of it you would have to ingest in order for it to just kill you, right? It wouldn't be much. In some cases, it'd be a half teaspoon. Other cases, it'd be a teaspoon or tablespoon would kill you. I don't think any emergency staff could save you, okay? So this is pretty toxic stuff. Anything that kills a bug, kills a plant, yeah, it's toxic stuff. So systemic pesticides and neonicotinoid pesticides. So one of the reasons that beekeepers and scientists and butterfly lovers are worried about systemic pesticides is because of the way they work. They are a substance that gets into the plant itself and becomes part of the entire plant. Okay, so it's part of the root, it's part of the leaves, it's part of the stem, it's part of the flower, part of the nectar, part of the pollen, right? So, so systemic pesticide is pretty good. It's a pretty good name for it, right? An aphid lands on it and chews any part of that plant, the aphid's going to die pretty quickly. So will the whitefly, so will the scale. So this stuff does work. It works marvelously well. But the bee lands on it and takes the nectar, takes the pollen back to her hive. It'll weaken that bee herself, and it's going to weaken her queen, and it's going to weaken her sisters. To some degree, it's going to do that. The manufacturers of these systemic pesticides are saying that, oh, it's not much. It's okay. The bees are all right, and they've done their own testing, which some scientists find suspect. In any case, though, that's what a systemic pesticide is. Neonicotinoids, which is a mouthful, and I promise you I will stumble over that word at least a couple of times tonight. Neonicotinoids are a certain class of systemic pesticides. There's many systemic pesticides. Systemic pesticides are new things, relatively. What happens is the seed gets coated with the systemic pesticide, and you buy it that way. You might be buying it that way, unless you look carefully and work hard to not buy systemic pesticide on your seeds. Or a plant might be treated with it, a bulb might be treated with it, etc. It doesn't need very much. I mean, if you think about how small a seed is, just that coating of systemic pesticide, in a lot of cases, the neonicotinoids, is enough to make the plant systemically poisonous to bugs that land on it, including bees, butterflies, bumblebees, wild bees, hummingbirds, right? So that's those two, and it's types of pesticides. Who makes these? Bayer and Syngenta. Bayer's been around for over 100 years. A very big company. We could talk a little bit about Bayer's history perhaps later on during Q&A if you want to. They don't have a nice history. Syngenta is a newer company. Bayer is German. Syngenta is a Swiss company. And this is a list of the major neonicotinoid pesticides. They're a mouthful. The one that gets used the most is at the top, imidacloprid. Clothianidid gets used quite a bit as well. In any case, though, there's 2 or 3 more neonics. We call them neonics, not affectionately, just because it's easier to say. And there's a couple others, and there's more coming online. These companies keep producing more. The EPA has said they're not going to legalize a couple of new ones that have come along. There'll always be new pesticides because companies make a lot of money off of pesticides and herbicides. In any case, those are some names that you'll probably very quickly forget, but those are the most popular or the most used neonicotinoids. So 51% is a number worth holding on to. 51% refers to how many plants in the US, in stores, bedding plants and seeds and such, have been treated with neonicotinoids, right? So you're sitting there thinking, you're going, I'm not going to use this stuff, sounds like bad news, and I'm trying to be an organic gardener anyway. I don't know how much gardening happens at 10,000 feet, but we know it's theoretically possible. So you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't buy that stuff anyway, right? Well, you might be buying it and you don't know, because I didn't know. Friends of the Earth did a study last year. They went in 18 different cities across the US and Canada. They asked people, volunteers in each one of these towns, to go into a store and buy some plants. They went into, a woman in Boulder who did it, a woman named Janet Kilby, who's active with Friends of the Earth, a volunteer. She walks into Lowe's and Home Depot in Boulder, and she buys 12 plants, and she sends them off to a lab that Friends of the Earth had hired to investigate the plants, examine them for what's on them. And sure enough, half of them had been treated with neonicotinoids. None of them had been marked as having been treated with neonicotinoids. All of them had been marked as bee-friendly plants. Yeah. And all of them were bee-friendly plants. I think she had a hyssop, I think she had a couple annuals, maybe some bachelor button in there. A sunflower, I think, that she picked up, sunflower seed perhaps. In any case, though, 50% had been treated with neonicotinoids. So you're trying to do the right thing and buy the bee-friendly plants, because you want to do the right thing, right? I've been wanting to do the right thing in my garden for a long time. Well, you have a 50% chance, 51% actually, after looking at all of the numbers across the country, 51% was the number they found, have been treated with neonicotinoids. So you can't very easily do the right thing, okay? So we have a problem here, a significant problem. So this is a simple equation, sort of, that comes from an article that just came out. This is a peer-reviewed article that came out by Dave Goulson et al. You can see perhaps the names of the other writers who worked on this. This appeared in Science just now in March. It's a very good article. If anybody's interested in articles, I can send you links to articles or the articles themselves. This one, Goulson looked at a lot of different issues, and he's a scientist, and he's not going to do what I do. I'm an activist and say pesticides bad. He's not going to do that. Scientists don't do that, and thank God they don't, right? In any case, though, he looked at a number of different issues, and he says that he has this wonderful little flow chart, right? I just put it into equation terms. And he talks about the different issues that are undermining bees and also other pollinators that are very important as well. Habitat loss is a big issue. Urbanization and giant corporate farms. Michael Pollan, if you've read his book Omnivore's Dilemma and his other work on plants and the American diet, he calls places like Iowa just these giant urbanized areas. They're like these parking lot. They have all the biodiversity of a parking lot, of a paved parking lots in these cornfields and soybean fields in Iowa and Indiana and places like that. Because you've got fence row to fence row, you have the same plant. It is corn. It's genetically modified corn, because what is it, 80% of corn now planted is genetically modified. Genetic modification is important to think about and talk about, not necessarily because of the genetic modification, though there probably are concerns with that, because of what you can do to a plant once it's been genetically modified. And if I forget to pursue this when somebody asks me to pursue it, or maybe one of you want to talk about it. In any case, though, habitat loss is a really big issue, right? Plants, bees, butterflies, pollinators need lots of plants. They need diversity of plants. They aren't going to get that because of the monotonous floral resources out there, right? For one thing, corn doesn't really produce a flower, it produces a pollen, and it's wind-borne. But there's lots and lots of corn where there used to be diverse flowers growing 200 years ago. Yeah, the bees, butterflies are going to struggle with that. So you have habitat loss, from crops, from actual cities, and then you have monotonous floral resources. You also, one of the things that, and I'll touch on this, I think, lightly here, right? Genetically modified plants, most of them have been genetically modified to enable the farmer to use a whole lot of Roundup on that plant, right? So you could use, and Roundup will kill a plant if it hasn't been genetically modified to resist Roundup. So the corn, the soy, is genetically modified to be able to handle Roundup, okay? So if you get a whole lot of that genetic, the conventional corn, you too are Roundup ready, which is the term that they use, Roundup ready. So you throw a whole lot of Roundup on it. So what does the Roundup do? It kills weeds really well, and you do need to control weeds. I'm an organic gardener, and I do a lot of weed control. Oftentimes I think that's all I do as an organic gardener. I just control weeds, or not. In any case, though, what you used to have on your average farm, there would be, between the corn rows, between the soybean rows, at the end of the rows, you would have all kinds of weeds. You'd have milkweed, you'd have sunflowers, you'd have the clovers, the alfalfas, all these wild plants that grow and feed and sustain pollinators. They've been growing on this continent for thousands of years. But you don't really have them anymore because Roundup-ready plants work really well, and Roundup works really well, though there is the concern that some weeds are now becoming super weeds, and they too are becoming Roundup-ready. So we have a very nasty agricultural problem developing. In any case, though, there's that issue out there, right? So the Roundup has killed the weeds that our little bees, our little butterflies used to eat. And so then you have the problem of the poor pollinator diet. One of the things that Golson talks about in his article is that if any of us in the room, were to only eat sardines for a month, and then only eat, gluten, bread, wheat for a month, and only eat raspberries for a month, we become ill because that's not a diverse diet. Bees are the same way. It seems like life on our planet has a lot in common. You got to have a diverse diet, and they are not getting a diverse diet. Those almond bees, right? The bees that get trucked around the country following almond harvest and such, those little bees suffer a lot because all they're eating is almonds for months at a time, and it leads to a poor diet, which compromises their own immunity, just as it would with us, right? Neonicotinoid pesticides make pollinators susceptible to diseases, or it just outright kills them. If a bee takes in enough, it'll just kill her before she gets back to the hive. Usually the effect is a neurological effect. She can't find her way back to her hive, or she just can't function very well, she can't think very well. Anyway, it's a neurological effect that neonicotinoid pesticides normally have. But it also makes them more susceptible to diseases. The last one's a little bit, the fungicides increase toxicity of plants. It's a little bit hard to follow, but what's happening is these neonicotinoids, they get into the soil and they get into the water and they persist there. They do not go away. They don't break down, right? So other plants can actually, that are right next to a big cornfield that has been treated with neonics, and the neonic seed, so the genetically modified corn and soybean seeds are oftentimes dipped in neonic. So they're both genetic, you can put Roundup on them, and they already have neonicotinoid on them, right? So they're not going to be, they're going to be resistant, the weeds are under control, and the bugs are under control. Sounds like heaven for a farmer, right? Except the significant problems that it's causing. The corn's going to grow fine, but a lot of other things, there's some other consequences, some unintended consequences. So what happens is if you have milkweed that does manage to find a little tiny yard of land and can resist the Roundup that's being sprayed on them, right? It grows next to that corn. It actually can take up the neonic, because the neonic persists in the soil and in the water and can persist for up to 20 years. So it takes it up into the milkweed, so the milkweed's got neonic in it now too, okay? So it's insidious. The stuff's everywhere. And if you look at a map, if we have time, maybe I'll show it to y'all. If you look at a map of all of our waterways that have neonic in it, it's frightening. And the places where we have the most neonicotinoid pesticides showing up are all of our farming areas. Colorado actually has relatively little of it. And apparently it's a little bit easier to keep bees alive in Colorado than it is in Iowa and Indiana and places like that. We move on. 42% was what that all equated to. I want to say it again. 42% of beekeepers are losing their hives. The number is higher for me, lower for others, but 42% nationwide is the beehive loss every year, right? The number used to be, I understand, over 95%. What do I mean by that? Over 95% of bees would make it through the winter in the past. Call it 20, 25 years ago. If you talk to a beekeeper like Tim Theobald, the beekeeper beekeepers in the room have a similar history. He would, like 97%, he said he would lose 2 to 3% of his hives, and he had over 300 hives back in the day. He would lose 2 to 3% per year. Now the number's 42%. Tom has quit producing honey. He can't keep doing it. He owns Niwot Honey down in Boulder County. Because his numbers are, he says, about 50%. That's what his numbers were. And you can't make a living that way. You can't. So this is the monarch butterfly. I want to talk about the monarch butterfly a little bit. I've talked mostly about bees so far. The monarch butterfly, very pretty creature. She's on, I don't know the gender of butterflies. I know most bees you see, the vast majority are going to be female. Butterflies, I have no idea. In any case, though, this butterfly is sitting on milkweed. That's a milkweed plant there. And you might know that the monarch butterflies are in trouble as well. So are bumblebees. Monarch butterflies historically used to be in billions and billions, and they'd come up from Mexico where they'd winter for the winter. They'd spend the winter, and then they'd come up to places like Iowa, Indiana, and they would feast on this abundance of plants that would be there in Iowa and Indiana before it became the giant corporate agriculture mecca that it now is. So you might have heard that the numbers are now down to something like 3% of the monarch butterflies of their previous numbers are making it to Iowa, the sturdy little things. And they don't have anything to eat. So what are the central causes? There's a number of different causes. Part of it, one of the causes is logging in Mexico in their winter grounds. And that's what Americans used to blame it all on, those darn Mexicans chopping down trees. As if we don't do our own logging in this country. In any case, though, they chop down trees and the bees, or not the bees, the butterflies would hang onto the trees over the course of the winter. They'd fly up to Iowa and Indiana, and they get to Iowa and Indiana, they've somehow survived the lack of trees and such. In Mexico, they get to Iowa and Indiana, and they find, where's the milkweed? The milkweed, where is that? They love milkweed. It's not there. It's been killed off by the Roundup. Bumblebees are struggling as well. Bees, honeybees love milkweed as well. Hummingbirds like milkweed. Everything small, and every pollinator I can think of likes milkweed. But a lot of it's gone because, again, of the Roundup and different things, different strategies we've been using to create our food, to grow our food these days, modern industrial agriculture. So there's our monarch butterfly. So humans are also at risk. The World Health Organization just this spring announced that glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup, and it is, as I said earlier, the most popular weed killer in the world. Maybe I didn't say that, but if I didn't say that, I should have said that. The most popular weed killer in the world. And again, Roundup is the main herbicide that gets used in genetically modified plants, which are Roundup ready. So there's a Roundup residue on the plants, the conventional foods that you're eating. Apparently, Roundup is showing up in umbilical cords. Pesticides, sort of in general, are showing up in umbilical cords. It's really prevalent stuff in all kinds of places. So humans are also at risk. And so you might be asking, well, do these pesticides work? Maybe you're saying, well, we have no choice. We need to produce a lot of food. There's over 7 billion people on the planet, 310 million Americans. By golly, we have to do this. Maybe. The jury's still out. We do need to control weeds. You need to control pests. Organic farmers are managing to do it. They can produce an awful lot of food, but they are not producing the amounts that conventional farmers are producing. The EPA reported last year that the use of neonicotinoid pesticides does not lead to better soybean yields. They're looking at corn now, right? So if you think about it, the farmers are spending a lot of money on this stuff. It ain't cheap, right, to get these crops that are treated with neonicotinoid pesticides. And you spray your crops as well over the course of your growing season. You spray them with neonic to kill the bugs and to kill, and you also use Roundup in that way. And there's no evidence in regard to soybean yields that this is helping. You aren't getting bigger yields. So it's ironic, isn't it? So the other number, the film clip mentioned this, and I think this is where I'm going to pause in just a minute, but 33%, honeybees, that's just honeybees. Honeybees are responsible for some 33% of our food in this country. So 1 out of every 3 bites beekeepers like to say and activists like to say is brought to you by a honeybee. That's significant. My favorite foods, I love fruits and vegetables, especially fruits, are brought to me by my little bees. It's one of the reasons I became a beekeeper is I have an organic garden and I wanted more cucumbers, watermelon, cantaloupe, etc. And sure enough, I got it. But 33% of the food supply brought to us by honeybees, 16 to $18 billion industry in this country. Indirectly, pollinators are responsible for some 75% of our food supply. For instance, coffee comes to you via wild bees, usually, and bumblebees bumblebees are the central pollinators of tomatoes, not honeybees. So anyway, it's a huge industry. So we do get something from them, an awful lot, you can call them pollinator services, and they're important services. So how can you help bees and other pollinators? You're probably hearing me insinuate this. Don't use pesticides, especially systemic pesticides. And as I say, that can be difficult to do. Spread the word, educate, talk to your neighbors. One of the things that's happening in Boulder, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about this later on, is an organization called Be Safe Boulder has got people, they organized a grassroots effort, just going out and talking to your neighbors and asking them not to use pesticides, telling them what the consequences are and asking them not to use it. And that works very well. We're finding it works quite well, and I'll talk more about that later perhaps. You can ask questions. I was just buying some gardening supplies, some bedding plants yesterday, and I went to my favorite nursery and I asked them, hey, are you guys using pesticides? Because sometimes a store, they're using, the clerk doesn't know whether they are or not. They bought the plant came into them already treated with pesticides, and they don't even know that kind of thing. So in Boulder, we've been really asking our nurseries and places that sell plants to get on top of, okay, are these plants safe for my garden, etc. You can talk to your lawn care company. Just this morning, before I came up here, True Green arrived at my next door neighbor's house to spray his lawn with poison, and I'm still stung over losing 2 of my hives, and I did talk to the young man. I'm not going to demonize him either. He's a nice young man. He's not wearing a mask. I told him about the World Health Organization study. I said, I'm worried for you. I'm worried for what you're doing to the yard here in our little neighborhood. And he did use an organic treatment for the backyard, which is where my bees are, and for this little strip next to our driveway. But then he used the full-on poison weed and feed on the central yard. Talk to your tree care companies as well. That's complicated. We have emerald ash borer in Boulder, and up here you have the pine beetle. So, but there are some less toxic alternatives, and you probably know about those, probably know a lot more about those than I do, but it is worth talking about. Plant untreated seeds and plants that pollinators like. Choose organic seeds and plants whenever possible. Choose organic food whenever possible. And let dandelions and catnip and other weeds grow in your yard. They are important food for bees and other pollinators. The city of Boulder has decided to let its weeds grow, and so you go past these big city-owned parks and such in Boulder, and it's covered with the light, powdery, seeds of dandelions. And I used to not like that look. I used to try to control it, but now I don't care. In fact, now I kind of like it. It has this feathery look. It's attractive. Anyway, so in catnip, those weeds and such, if you don't want them, do consider pulling them up by hand. You try the boiling water. I hear 5 treatments of boiling water will kill anything, any weed. Maybe not knapweed, but in any case, you can try those different things. So there's some things you can do. I'm a teacher, and I feel like I've been talking for a long time. If you were my students, you'd be rustling around and leaving. So I'm going to stop here and ask you if you have any questions, comments, things you want to add. I do have some other things I want to talk about, but I wanted to just take some time to do this right now before we can continue.
How far can a bee, go from a hive to pollinate something?
Up to 5 miles. Is what I hear. Does that sound right to you? Yeah, 3 to 5 miles. And if you think about it, they bring that nectar back to the hive. It's a tremendous amount of work to make just a wee little bit of honey, right? Did you want to add to that?
Worker honeybee will produce in her lifetime 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. A typical honeybee, female worker bee, will live 4 to 6 weeks. These are some of the little issues in honeybee biology that people don't know and are very, very interrelated. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an astounding amount of work to produce honey.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. That's why you need 50,000 girlfriends, or I need 50,000 girlfriends in my backyard working for me.
Right, exactly. In the back there.
Are there wild honeybee colonies up here, or hives, whatever they're called?
I don't know up here this high.
You know, Larry?
I've got probably about a half a dozen native bees in my yard. We live up against the hillside, and we've got bumblebees, and we've got some others. But I haven't, they're primarily solitary bees. Okay. Bumblebees are solitary bees by and large. It's a whole different system than a social bee like the honeybee.
Yeah.
But there are native pollinators that are here. There's no question about it. And of course, what is already pointed out by you is that it's not just the honeybees that are in trouble with all this craziness that's going on. Not enough to eat pesticides, etc.
Right, yeah. I understand that honeybees and, excuse me, not honeybees, but wild bees and butterflies that are away from urbanized areas or agricultural areas are doing fairly well. But it's the butterflies and the wild bees and the bumblebees that are close into cities that are struggling as much as the honeybees are. In some cases, this European study suggests that they're actually struggling more, and a number of them have gone extinct because of industrial agriculture. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, what constitutes a colony, and about how many bees are there usually in a colony?
It varies. Right now, well, if you buy a little installation kit of bees, you get 3 pounds of bees, and that's about 11,000 bees. And they grow. If things go well, and the queen's laying eggs, she can lay up to like 1,000 eggs in a single day in the summertime. So she's just laying eggs all day long. And the hive can get up quite large, 50,000. The first time that my bees swarmed, which would be, I guess, 2 years ago, the guy and I who captured the swarm, he reckoned there were probably about 30,000 or 25,000 bees in the swarm, and that means that's half, because they leave the other half in the hive, so that hive can continue. When bees swarm, the hive is reproducing. And so they split in half. The queen leaves with half the hive, and the others stay in the hive. So the numbers vary. You can get it to 60,000, 80,000, I believe. That sound about right to you? Yeah. Yeah. There's lots and lots of bees in a hive if things are going well, and there need to be. That particular hive swarmed 3 times that summer because I'm a really bad beekeeper, and you go in and remove the queen cells, they kept coming out, and I'll leave too. At one point, I think we had you're down to 1,000 bees, but that hive came back and did very well the next year, but last year.
Well, the reason I asked is because at the beginning of that film, I think it showed this German beekeeper. It said he had 150 colonies. And
Yeah.
if there's 50 or 80,000 colonies, that's a lot of bees.
The size of those colonies, they're probably in the 20 to 30,000 range, but that's.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, they were much smaller. Beehives can get quite large. If you have, a tin frame, you can get this tall, you can have, lots.
There are various size boxes. I have a question. Have you seen the Consumer Reports study on, it's entitled Peach Not Pesticide? It's in the May issue.
No, I haven't seen that. No.
Consumer Reports, and they've got a study.
Oh, so what is it? What is its claim?
It's saying pesticides are not friendly to people.
Yeah.
They don't even touch pollinators, so that's the other half of your group. They concentrate on the people side.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we put together this group is we didn't want to focus exclusively on pollinators, though pollinators certainly matter a lot. We wanted to think a lot about people, especially children. Children are much more susceptible to the effects of these toxins. And there's some studies that are suggesting that the ADHD, the autism, that some of the other brain neurological disorders that we have in our culture, we have at very much higher numbers than we had, say, 50 years ago, are a result of all the toxins that are out there. Not just the pesticides, but the plastics and the bleaches and all the stuff that we're exposed to on a regular basis. Yeah. Yeah, the other thing, peaches especially, some of the fruits, peaches, anything that has nubby things on the fruit, strawberries, if that's being treated with a pesticide or an herbicide, it's going to hold on to that, especially peaches. Peaches, you really, and that's why I think they have the photo here of peaches here. If you're going to buy peaches, you really want to make sure that they're organic, or strawberries. Anything that's nubby, if you like to eat kiwi fruit, like to eat the peel, which many people do, don't buy the kind that's, don't buy conventional, buy organic, so it hasn't been sprayed with these toxins that hair can hold on to this. So what I want to do now is sort of shift focus and talk about this from a little bit more of a historical. How much time? I don't want to talk on and on. I could talk about this all night long. What are we getting to? We're getting to 7 o'clock. Okay. So maybe I'll just show one of these then. This first one here is a little piece that comes from the 1930s, and it's very excited about chemicals and all the different things you can do with chemicals. In the 1930s, I don't know if you know much about the history from the 30s, that's when antibiotics first appeared on the world stage. And that was a really wonderful thing, keeping in mind that tuberculosis, which is the reason that my family came to Colorado in 1887, yours too? Yeah, tuberculosis was killing lots of people. It's easily controlled with antibiotics, or at least it was. Syphilis, oh my gosh. The plague has killed more people than all of humanity's wars. All of these nasty diseases, gangrenes and such, are controlled by antibiotics. So in the 1930s, it was a wonderful thing that you could start using antibiotics, the sulfa drugs, and you could control these nasty things from happening. In the 1930s, if you look at the advertisements and such, and this one would be a good example, but it's it's a little bit longer than I want it to be, and it's the audio is not great. They're all excited about chemicals. And chemicals are the solution to everything. This company is DuPont. DuPont still exists. DuPont is one of the central makers of a genetically modified corn type. It's called the Liberty Link corn, and that's made by DuPont. They also make genetically modified foods. It's not just Monsanto. So there's this other piece, and I'm hoping it works. We'll see, right? We're always wondering. This is DuPont. And another DuPont, this came commercial, this came out in 1964. Let's see if we can plug this in.
Things for better living through chemistry, for the finer world we want. Better things for better living through chemistry, that's the promise of DuPont. Every day that we are living is such a thrill that we can't stay nonchalant. Better things for better living are coming still, that's the promise of DuPont.
So if you've heard that phrase, better living through chemistry, now you know where it came from. It actually showed up, apparently, that phrase in the 1930s, and it's become kind of a joke. But better living through chemistry, yeah. And baby boomers use different types of chemicals to, I'm a baby boomer, right?
Melissa knows when she's headed to yoga class, she might not actually be headed to yoga class.
Whoa. So I just want you to think about, I'm going to, as we sort of close off here, I want you to think about a little bit about chemistry, the promise of chemistry and the chemical companies. Over the course of the 20th century, we decided in a lot of ways that chemicals were the way to go. And from the very beginning of the century, 1914, 1915, began using chemicals on the battlefield, using chemical gas, right? Second World War, all kinds of chemicals got used in the concentration camps, got used to create all kinds of bombs and such, right? Chemicals were a big part of the Second World War, for better and very much for worse. After the Second World War, I don't know if you know that a lot of our pesticides actually came out of the munitions industry of the Second World War. Got to do something with those factories, and let's produce pesticides that kill pests. Pesticides became a really big business after the Second World War, so that's when DDT became the big thing it was, and before Rachel Carson and such. So just more and more chemicals seem to be a solution, right? So we can create artificial fertilizers and put them on our plants. This is a really good idea, right? Except that has led to waterways that are largely dead, and has led to that giant dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico because the waterways have become too fertile, and these giant algae blooms take over, and the giant algae blooms don't allow other things to live. It actually becomes an odd process that I don't fully understand. Anaerobic and other aquatic life can't live. Antibiotics were a great thing, and they still are a great thing, and I sure do want them to continue working. But as you know, they aren't working so well for a lot of different diseases because we're using them in livestock. 70% of antibiotics in this country get given to animals, and we eat them. Also, we get, a lot of us are taking antibiotics for the common cold. Antibiotics aren't going to work on a virus. So there's that sort of chemical solution. Other chemical solutions we've tried, DDT, right, let's kill off all the mosquitoes. My father in the Second World War was in the Philippines, and every night before climbing into his mosquito net, he was instructed to spray DDT all through the mosquito net and then get in. My father did have health problems throughout his 30s, but he lived another 50 years, lived to be 84 years old. But he did have some significant health problems, and no one knows why. Was it DDT? Who knows? Again, who knows, right? We never know this stuff. Agent Orange of Vietnam seemed like a great solution. Let's go defoliate Vietnam. We'll be able to find the Viet Cong. But we also sickened a bunch of citizens, civilians who were on the American side, and we sickened, of course, our own soldiers. Napalm was invented during the Second World War. It was what we used. We lit napalm on fire, and that's how we burned down cities like Dresden and a good portion of Tokyo. And other peoples used napalm as well. Vietnam War, we used it actually on people. We used it to subdue unfriendly villages and such. Real consequences for all of this. I don't know if you all know that a lot of your mattresses and cushions and pillows in your homes have been treated with chemicals to make sure they don't catch on fire. They did this because people used to smoke in bed. We still do it. Not exactly sure why we're still doing it. Those toxins are really there, and they aren't good for your nervous system. Still there. We really like chemicals, and with reason. They have their purpose, certainly. And I'm not going to go chemical free, but I do think that we've reached a carrying capacity that we need to think about. I also think that chemicals have reached a cultural acceptance that is dangerous. There's all kinds of signs that we have reached a chemical carrying capacity that is dangerous. Many people are calling bees the canary in the coal mine. That makes a whole lot of sense to me, that indeed they are a canary in a coal mine trying to tell us something pretty important. That is that we have gone far too far with this. So I want to end on a happy note. The 42% number is not a very nice number. Let's have a more interesting screen. How about that? Down in Boulder, we've been working on this issue for quite some time, and I know that Boulder's a different town than Breckenridge. I don't know what your progressive level might be up here. Boulder's a pretty progressive town. But we managed to do quite a few things. The Sierra Club put on an event on bees in March of 2014, and 160 people showed up, and it was a pretty successful event, and a number of people there that night formed what is now called Bee Safe Boulder, and they wanted to start pursuing bee safe neighborhoods. If you want to do that, you should check out their website. In any case, there were 11 neighbors who showed up together. They went out, went neighbor to neighbor, and they became the first bee safe neighborhood, apparently, in the world. That's what they say, and I think it could be true. And it was all just by talking neighbor to neighbor. And now there's 3 neighborhoods, including my own, and I did not do the work for my own neighborhood. It's astounding. One of my neighbors came to me about a year ago and said, I think we should become a bee safe neighborhood. Don't you know something about environmentalism? And, well, yeah, I've been an activist for a while. She did all the work. She and a couple other neighbors became engaged, and they did all the work, right? It appears that organizing around bee issues, right, pollinator issues, people care about bees. Yeah, we know that pesticides have been, making people sick and damaging children for 30, 40 years, and the whole DDT thing, right? But you bring bees into it, for some reason people pay attention, right? So if you all want to organize around honeybees, it's a pretty good choice. It works pretty well. We formed people in Pollinators actually. Whatever that said, that is our postcards for that campaign. We sent that out to about 30,000 people in Boulder County and Merrimack County, trying to get them to not use pesticides. So you can organize around this and you can do good things. I guess I'll end on this happy note. Climate change is really hard to address because every single thing we do involves fossil fuels, right? But not every single person in the country is using pesticides. So the ear is more open, right? It was awfully fun to drive up here in our fossil-fueled car in about an hour and a half. That was great. But it's hard to give that up, but I can live without pesticides. So if you want to organize around something and actually be able to achieve something, which is hard to do in an environment as an environmentalist, this is one of the ways you can do it. And we have done it in Boulder, and we got more to do, lots more to do, but we have been able to do that. Thanks for being so patient, Mr. Dean. Yeah, sure. If there's more questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
Doing better in Europe
because of the ban? Yeah.
Are they native to the America?
Honeybees are not native to North America, no. Honeybees come originally out of Africa. They aren't real keen on winter. That's not something they are used to. But they're real adapters. They've been around for millions of years. I've heard the number 50 million years, and Tim Broad tosses around the number. Another beekeeper uses the number 80 million years, right? So they can withstand most things. We'll see if they can withstand us, right? But they are not native to North America. No, they came over with the Europeans. It was so important to have honey that they brought them with them. Europe, how are they doing in Europe? They've been banned, as perhaps some of you know, the EU has a different philosophy in regard to potential environmental hazards than North America does. When they found out that there could be a connection between bee deaths and these new Dickson pesticides, which are the most prevalent pesticide in the world, they did something about it, and they banned neonics in Europe for 2 years. Dave Goulson and a number of other scientists are calling for an extension of that ban. I have not read whether if there's been a reduction in bee deaths. I'd like to make a guess on that there's a reduction in bee deaths, but I can't make that. I can't say that because I don't know that. But I know a lot of scientists wonder, because 2 years, the stuff gets in the soil and gets in water, so we're not free of it. We won't start to be free of it until at least 3 years, 4 years, and some of the stuff can persist for 20 years. So a lot of scientists are saying 2 years is not really long enough. Does anyone happen to know? Is there good news coming out of Europe? I heard something about France having better bee numbers. France banned bees or these pesticides earlier than the EU did. Apparently their numbers are a little bit better, but I haven't heard about the entirety of Europe. And of course, Britain has not engaged in that campaign. They're still using all kinds of neonics. Yes, please.
I'm wondering about a campaign with corporations, because what we've seen lately coming from Walmart and Taco Bell, at least requesting, if not requiring, no antibiotics.
Right.
If there's a campaign that would work with like Lowe's, I saw an announcement that they're not going to sell neonicotinoids.
After 2017 or 2018 or something? Yeah. They're going to. And Walmart. I'm glad you brought that up, because Walmart was part of the study that Friends of the Earth did. Walmart has not responded at all to these concerns. Home Depot now labels its neonic plants. It has a little label that says this plant has been treated with neonicotinoids, so it is safe from whitefly, scales. So like, oh, eureka, I'm going to buy it, right? And which they are getting some heat for, because that was duplicitous on their part. It is, yeah, you've labeled them, but you've made them sound enticing. I've had my share of aphids in my yard. So yeah, I think that corporate pressure does work quite well. PPAN, one of the ways that the People in Pollinators Action Network has been funded was through Lush Cosmetics, right? So take your money to Lush Cosmetics, right? They have a little shop down in Boulder, but yeah, they want to see a healthier world. Patagonia as well funds such things. I think there is no more power in America, more powerful than consumer power. We think, all of us, that we don't have any power, right? But we do have a tremendous amount of power based on what we buy and what we refuse to buy. First, you got to know what you might accidentally be buying, right? But I think there's tremendous power there, and I think that there's a real possibility there in going to corporations and saying, I'm not going to buy your stuff anymore. One of the things that Be Safe Neighborhoods did, and Sierra Club and PPAN have worked on as well, is going to the owners of these different shops that sell plants in Boulder County, and saying, we don't want you to sell neonicotinoid pesticides, and we want you to take a pledge that you won't do this anymore because this could be killing bees. And you say that to a store, especially a small store owner. If you know McGuckin's Hardware, they resolved not to use neonics anymore. Boulder Hardware in South Boulder sells some plants. They did the same thing. Sturts and Copeland in Boulder said, okay, we aren't going to have neonicotinoids plants anymore. If their house plants do have some neonic, but they'll be carefully labeled and not enticingly labeled. And then another plant, Harlequin Gardens in Boulder, if you've heard of that place, wonderful place. Michael Bronner has been dedicated to organic gardening for an awful long time. But still, in spite of his efforts, people were bringing in, he was accidentally buying neonic-treated plants, because it's very easy to do. He's totally committed now, and he's quite certain he's over 99% neonic-free. And how did that happen? People going and asking questions and talking to companies. You can, in Lowe's and Home Depot, it's a start. I'm proud of Lowe's for doing what they're doing. Walmart hasn't done anything yet. But that kind of pressure, that consumer pressure, is our best tool. And frankly, it's our only tool. One of the things that PPAN did this year is we tried to take on the Pesticide Applicators Act came up for renewal this year, and we worked on that issue. We wanted, because that issue was, that act is very pesticide applicator friendly. And we wanted to change a few things. We got a little bit. It's very hard to do though, because big corporations have real sway over, especially state politicians. So, good luck if you want to get some regulation with pesticides. It's a start, is what it is. But yeah, it's very difficult to do. Yeah.
So that Pesticide Applicators Act, it was getting ready to sunset after 10 years.
Right.
Is it now been
It is. It's been renewed, and it's 8 years. So now we have 8 years, right?
With stronger regulations than were there?
Applicators have to have more training, and the makeup of the committee that makes pesticide decisions now has an environmentalist and I believe a beekeeper on the committee. So before it was all industry, it was all the pesticide industry. So they got what they wanted. So your question is such a good one. The laws, EPA has been pretty pesticide friendly. A lot of our government entities have been pesticide friendly because these big corporations have a whole lot of money and they lobby, they know how to do it. And we environmentalists, well, you know how much money the Sierra Club has, right? And your group has probably about as much as Indian Peaks group has, which is not much. I'm a volunteer, right? These people get paid to make sure their pesticides are everywhere in this country. So yeah, that's one of the ways to do the process. Yeah, go ahead.
Two things. One is there a reason why the Be Safe voter effort focused only on the neonics and not Roundup? Because I know the Roundup might not affect the bees directly, but they would affect the flowers.
It's a very good question, and it's we work with Be Safe Boulder and Be Safe Neighborhoods. They call themselves Be Safe Boulder, and they work on achieving Be Safe Neighborhoods. In any case, though, they have been largely focused on neonics, And we are taking on all of pesticides because there's new pesticides coming. Neonics are passé, believe it or not. New pesticides coming along all the time. We wanted to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of the different types of pesticides that we take on. People and Pollinators Action Network, we are very worried about kids and people. So yeah, they tend to be pretty focused on neonics and not looking at Roundup. We're very worried about Roundup. And this young man who was spraying a yard with no mask at all today, I told him about the World Health Organization study, as I said, and because he shouldn't be doing that. I mean, that stuff's pretty toxic, and he seems to believe that it's not toxic enough to merit a mask. We're worried about things like that as well. But yeah, Roundup has massive consequences that we don't fully understand, I'm quite sure. Yeah.
The second thing is, you were kind enough to let us videotape this presentation. I think you did videotape it, Jenny?
Yep.
And also kind enough to consent to us putting it on YouTube.
I said it in front of a lot of people now. Yes, that's fine.
I just wanted to alert everybody to that, and I'm not sure how they will find it on YouTube after Jenny puts it on there, but can you give them advice as to...
I'll send a link to the Blue River group, and Kent can put it out on the listserv.
Yeah, the title, I don't know, Sierra Club, Blue River Group, Pesticide Talk. You can all
Well, I think that's the other important thing, that in addition to consumerism, our consumer power, what we can do is the power of networking. And this was really brought to you by a small group of 10 dedicated Sierra Club members for the Blue River Group that picked this topic and found a speaker, found Rebecca, and made this all happen. So that's, if you want to stay connected and informed on what's going on with bees or the Sierra Club, please make sure that you sign in on our sign-in sheet and to help pay for the room that Heidi gave us at such a great discount for CMC. Buy a plant.
Right. The Sierra Club, I mean, I've been involved with the Sierra Club for 12, 14 years now or something in leadership roles because it's a great network and there's a lot of stuff that's already in place. And being involved with PPAN, I found we got to invent a lot of stuff that's already in place with the Sierra Club, but they can do different things, and that's why I'm involved with both organizations and Be Safe Neighborhoods and other organizations as well. Yes, please, ma'am.
So how do you get rid of aphids?
Okay, I'm going to tell you the story. I wasn't going to tell it the story unless somebody asked, okay? So the little shamrock that could is sitting in my backyard right now because I can put it outside. The little shamrock that could I've had since 1982. My sister gave it to me, right? And it has aphids right now. So I went to Sturts and Copeland yesterday and I bought a whole bunch of ladybugs. And I'm going to go home tomorrow. They're sitting in my refrigerator, and tomorrow at dusk, I'm going to put all those ladybugs on my my little shamrock that could, and those aphids will be gone really quickly. Yeah, so ladybugs work very well. I don't know if you can buy ladybugs up here, but I know you can. They work very well, and I'll put it out in the middle of my garden where there's all kinds of other things for them to eat, and because they'll clear off the aphids really quickly. Yeah, or you know what you can do with aphids, and might be revealing too much here, just squish the darn things, you know? It actually gives me a certain amount of pleasure that I shouldn't be sharing with an audience like this, but sometimes it makes me so mad that it makes my day. Yeah. Probably get that out more. Yeah. Somebody else had a question back there, please, yes?
Well, this is a related question, actually. Do you have other suggestions for non-bee killing pesticides? I have used diatomaceous earth successfully on ants before.
Yeah.
And I've also used dilute soapy water in a spray bottle on aphids.
Right.
But I'm just wondering if there's anything else you would recommend.
The diatomaceous earth works really well on slugs as well, but so does beer, right? I got a lot of slugs once upon a time. I'm getting ready to put it out again this year. But apparently they like Coors beer the best. They probably when they drown. Also more pleasure. Yeah, I mean, you can also use cayenne pepper sprays. You can use vinegar sprays. The boiling water thing on weeds does work. I have used that before. I had red ants moving into my garden at one point. I saw where they were going, and I just went in, boiled some water, poured it on there. Just one application, I never saw another red ant in my garden. They might be in the grass, but I don't care about the grass. You know, the grass has clover in it. It has dandelions. It has all kinds of things in it. I just mow it, right? But cayenne pepper does work pretty well. Yeah, there's different things you can use. If you go online and look at organic solutions or IPM, integrated pest management solutions, they are out there. There's a lot of organic farmers who are doing very well. On the other hand, and this may not be a happy answer that you want to hear. I mean, the way I look at it to some degree is everybody's got to eat. Aphids feed ladybugs. Aphids feed praying mantis. Aphids feed ants. Aphid feeds they feed all kinds of things, and it goes up a food chain. I mean, I'm not sure I want all the aphids in the world to die, even though they nearly killed my shamrock this winter. But you know, I think that one of the things that the points I was trying to make in regard to the chemical issue is that I think we need a very different worldview. And one of the worldview shifts we think we need to make is we look at our yard, and I think we need to redefine a green, perfect carpet yard is not a healthy yard. It's not a healthy ecosystem. It's a monoculture. And if we rethink things, now that those big green yards that are so coveted by weekend lawnmowers are really unhealthy. And after a while, you start looking at them, they actually are kind of ugly. My yard is not one of them. I have most of my yard is in garden, and all kinds of flowers. And right now, the penstemons coming in, the catmint's dying. No, the catmint's still going strong. But the penstemons coming in, I have echinacea, and all of this stuff. It's just chives. They've just taken over. That's okay with me. And there's such a diversity of plants that the bugs, aphids like, shamrocks, and they like bachelor buttons, but they don't like sunflowers. They never get on them. So you can do that. That diversity of plant life is good for your bees, and it's also good for your yard. And the bugs, they'll go after one plant, but they aren't going to go after the others, and that can be helpful as well. There's all kinds of things you can do. But I know it is, I'm being light with aphids, but I know that bugs, really have the consequences too. I mean, we need some control. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, so, from an individual practice perspective, like aside from obviously not buying pesticides yourself, doing things like that, buying organic foods, would be the only solution to the situation? What else? Is there anything else that can be done?
Yeah, that's anything else that can be done. I'm sure later on I'm going to think I should have said X, Y, and Z. So buying organic is pretty important, right? It is more expensive. It's interesting, isn't it? It's more expensive for what you don't get. But buying organic is a pretty important solution. Yeah, spreading the word. In terms of how to protect bees, getting active politically. Are you asking in regard to how to have a successful garden, or?
No, just to help the bees out, like as an individual, like as far as like your habits and
Oh
practices.
yeah. One of the things you can certainly do is, tear up your lawn if you have a lawn, and put in bee-friendly plants and butterfly-friendly plants. I make fun of my yard, but I get a lot of compliments in my yard every year. It's not weed-free by any means, but a lot of people are walking by and they go, "I love your yard. It's my favorite in the neighborhood." And I say, "Get a little bit closer and you'll see all the weeds." But it is flowering all the time, and that is probably the best thing that I could have done for my little ecosystem. That and not using pesticides. And I gotta say, yeah, it's pretty. So yeah, plant plants that bees like, that butterflies like, and they are pretty, and you can gather them up and keep them in your house when you have far too many of them, which I do. But yeah, that's one of the things you can do as well. Other thoughts? Do you guys have any thoughts about other things you can do to help bees and butterflies and pollinators? Yeah.
I was thinking, there's at a statewide level, there's organizations like CDOT that maintain all of the roadside areas, and the plants that they use along those roadside areas could be more pollinator friendly.
Right.
And that would provide lots of habitat. And I suppose that would go for city and county road maintenance as well, and other kinds of public areas where, if it's possible, to look at what kinds of plants are being used in those public areas.
That is one of the things that I wake up in the middle of the night and go, "Why did I say that?" Because your question is a very good one. Pesticides get used on road medians and next to roads. Give you an example, behind my house is a bike trail in Boulder. Great, got a bike trail right there, it takes us into downtown. But the mowers, the city mowers come along and they mow the heck out of the area. They're mowing alfalfa, they're mowing blue flax, Colorado blue flax, and sunflowers, and all kinds of different flowers, plants that my bees and butterflies like. They mow them all down to this stub, and then cheatgrass comes in. So I've called a couple times and asked them not to mow, and that puts them off for a year or two. I called about 2 years ago and I said, please don't mow. I have bees, and they did listen to that some more. That is one of the things that PPAN is really working on, and Sierra Club is working on, is trying to get the county to change its mowing process, plans, and that's, you don't need to, do you need 20 feet on the other side of a road? You really don't. If there's a running trail there, yeah, sure, let's give people their running path and their biking path. But it doesn't, you don't need to use pesticides on it. Those are little things, that isn't little. That's a lot of forage. If you think about how many highways we have in this country, how many roadways we have in this country, what we do next to them matters a lot. And that's forage for bees, butterflies, wild bees, bumblebees, etc. So that's another thing you can do as well. Yeah?
What are those little bee houses people are sitting down
Yeah.
there?
You can put those in your yard, yeah. Yeah, CU Boulder has a big program they're doing right now with that, where you can go in and they already gave away all their little bee boxes. It's these wild bee boxes, and they have a couple observation wild bee boxes that you can open up this little flap and it's glassed in. You can see there's a little wild bee right there and right there. Most of those bees are solitary bees. You were saying that. And you can see where they live, and you give them a little habitat. You can also, I've been trying to get bumblebees to nest in my yard for quite some time. That was one of the most disturbing things about the flood. This is the way my brain works. I had the 2013 floods that really affected my neighborhood. And yeah, we had a little bit of flooding in our own den. I was worried about my bees. I kept going out every hour. Bees, are you still okay? And they're up on cinder blocks, so they were, because there was 6 inches of water in the yard. But also, I worried about the bumblebees, because bumblebees tend to nest in the ground, and yeah, we did lose a lot of bumblebees. But they, they're resilient. As long as you're not poisoning them, they'll come back, and they are coming back.
You can make houses for them too.
You can't. Yeah, I've been trying to use this little.
With the pots.
Yeah, the pot
and the cotton and.
Yeah, nothing's happened yet. Have you been successful with that? Nothing yet, but I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. I have bumblebees. These giant bumble mice, I call them. They get really big, and they're buzzing around. I'd love to have some of them in my backyard, but not yet. Hasn't happened yet. Other questions? Thanks.
We're probably ready to let you go.
All right, go ahead.
You talked a lot about things that are going on in Boulder and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Is there a lot of other areas throughout the country and other towns that are
Yeah.
really doing stuff like this as well?
There are, right, and that's one of the reasons EPA is listening to these conversations. Seattle was one of the big places, and they worked very hard because is in Washington. Am I getting this right? In Washington, there was they approved using a whole bunch of neonics on a clam bed, right? Because they wanted to get rid of bugs that were going after the clams. Am I getting this right? And
You're on the right track.
Oh my gosh, and the beekeepers and the activists said, are you kidding? You're going to use a whole bunch of neonic in Washington State, which has been working on neonics for some time. They yelled and screamed until they got attention, and they reversed that, right? So I believe that St. Paul, I believe, is a neonic-free city. So we aren't alone, right? There's different pockets of the country that are working on this, and all over the world people are working on neonics, so we're not alone with this. So there's all kinds of models you can go to. You can Google Be Safe Neighborhoods. That's an organization in Golden. Be Safe Boulder got the idea from this organization in Golden about how to organize that, and they can really help you do that. So, and if anybody wants to email me, Rebecca.Dickson@comcast.net, I do a lot of organizing, so I could help in any way that I could. But yeah, and as I say, organizing around bees is a lot easier than climate change, right? Yeah, but I'm working on climate change too.
Can we put your information, the presentation on our Blue River
Feel free
website?
to. Yeah, that's fine.
I was just going to say, especially where a lot of this for the pesticides is controlled at the state and national level, that a town like Boulder, at the state level, a lot of the state legislatures, if we've got a state rep that wants to introduce something, the state legislature, oh, it's just Boulder.
There goes Boulder.
Right. Other places from around the state can start up and say, hey, no, we're
Breckenridge cares too, right?
Yeah. It's just not Boulder, just being Boulder.
Right, right. And if you wanted to become active with PPAN, which is our group, we invite you involved with that as well. Yeah, we need to get beyond Boulder County, the little Republic of Boulder, which has more truth to it than I really like to admit. But anyway, yeah, you can do that. By the way, if anybody wants, I mentioned a number of articles, there's many other articles, peer-reviewed articles I can send you. You can also check this stuff out on Mother Jones, and other, am I getting that name right, Mother Jones?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Lots of publications on these issues, but I'm happy to send anybody if you want to take a look at them. If you have any more questions, thoughts, concerns, if you feel like I could help you with organizing, happy to try. But it's an important issue, and we are winning a lot of battles. So I want you to be encouraged by this. We don't need to go wring our hands over this on top of everything else, do we? We can win this one, and we are getting someplace, right? You know, think about tobacco, right? The corporations behind these chemicals are coming at people like me and activists all over the world the same way they went after people who denied, or people who suggested that tobacco may not be good for us. Same thing happening with climate change. They go after the scientists, they go after the activists. But, you know, tobacco is greatly restricted. Americans are smoking a whole lot less than we used to. And, you know, we can win stuff if we work together. So, let's work together. Thanks, y'all.
All kinds of songs. I have faith that if only people get a chance to hear a lot of different kinds of things, they'll decide what are the good ones. Young fellow up in Maine just last year taught me a nice song. Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and low, gonna make it fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, please bless these seeds I sow. Please keep them safe below till the rain come tumbling down. Pulling weeds, picking stones, we are made of dreams and bones. Need a spot to call my own, for the time is close at hand. Grain for grain, sun and rain, find my way in nature's chain. Tune my body and my brain to the music of the land. Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and low, gonna make it fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, please bless these seeds I sow. Please keep them safe below till the rain come tumbling down. Plant your rows short or long, season with a prayer and a song. Mother Earth will make you strong if you give her loving care. Old crow watches from a tree, God is hungry, eye on me. In my garden I'm as free as that feathered thief up there. Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and low,